This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Off the job. Cumberland Municipal Council discharges a volunteer fire chief and deputy chief following the death of a snowmobiler.
Canada's comeback city, Halifax leads the way in downtown recovery after the pandemic.
And the Grief Project. This South Shore artist is turning feelings of loss into something beautiful.
A quiet start to Thursday, but snow arriving into the afternoon with a change to rain and gusty winds in the evening. Your full forecast is coming up.
In a first for Cumberland County, a volunteer fire chief and deputy chief have been discharged from their duties.
This comes after a CAO report alleges the Collingwood Corner fire chief hit and killed a man while driving a fire truck on Friday and then lied about it. The CBC's Nicholas Sagan has the details.
A packed council chamber filling with applause. The councillors voting to remove the Collingwood Corner volunteer fire chief Gerald Cotton and deputy chief Andrea Bishop, change the locks and ban them from the fire station for life. Municipal officials say Cotton lied about hitting and killing a man with a fire truck Friday night.
There was one report came back from the RCMP, and Sunday was a different one, and Monday it changed a bit again. And you know what? Once the hard evidence came out on Monday about what had happened as far as the fire truck striking the victim, then it was time for us to act.
This comes after the death of 28-year-old Blake Nicholson. The Collingwood Corner Fire Department was called for help when Nicholson crashed his snowmobile near Poison Lake Friday night. RCMP say Nicholson was then hit by the fire truck and pronounced dead shortly after. The municipal CAO told council that Cotton lied to officials about hitting Nicholson with the fire truck on multiple occasions after the incident. The CAO also said Cotton responded to an emergency call on Monday after publicly saying he would step away from his duties. Friends and family came to represent Nicholson, who leaves behind his fiancée and 2-year-old son. His family is left asking why it took so long for council to remove the fire chief, knowing Cotton had been convicted for driving a fire truck drunk in 2020.
Can you confirm us that the next one won't do the exact same thing? Because right now, my best friend's dead.
Why hasn't it been dealt with? It's been ongoing since 2020, I guess.
Harriet says the municipality previously didn't have the power to get rid of a volunteer chief, but a new bylaw was put in place in 2024.
The bylaw that we use today, there was no authority to remove individual chiefs or deputy chiefs of departments. The only option that was available to the municipality to deal with a situation like this would be to disband the department, a pretty extreme option. And so with the enactment of the bylaw, we were able to do that this time around.
So this is a first?
It is a first.
And did you enact that bylaw because of past actions by the chief? We know he's been convicted of impaired driving in the past.
Yes.
The RCMP hasn't laid any charges but has seized the fire truck and says the investigation is ongoing. Nicholas Sagan, CBC News, Upper Napan.
A 50-year-old man has been charged after allegedly striking and killing a woman with his vehicle last week in Cape Breton. Cape Breton Regional Police say the woman in her 20s was hit by the vehicle at Celtic Drive near the intersection of O'Neill's Lane near Sydney last Thursday. The vehicle failed to stay at the scene. Jason Gordon-Cashin has been charged with failing to stop after an accident causing death.
Cape Breton's 2 Liberal MPs will be competing to represent the same riding in the next federal election. Jaime Batiste and Mike Kellaway both want to run in the new federal riding of Sydney-Glace Bay. Kyle Moore reports.
Mike Kellaway works away in his Sydney office on Grand Lake Road. He is one of 2 high-profile and currently elected Liberals hoping to run in the new federal riding of Sydney-Glace Bay in the next election. Kellaway has been a Liberal MP for Cape Breton-Canso for 6 years.
My intentions are to run in my home community, where I was born, where I was raised, and where I work and where I live now.
His competition, fellow Liberal MP Jaime Batiste. He released a statement saying, as a result of the boundaries redistribution, over 75% of Sydney Victoria will form part of the newly established riding of Sydney-Glace Bay, and that he should be the candidate. A surprising statement, according to Kellaway.
Well, naturally, I would disagree with that. It's an open process.
The ridings of Sydney Glace Bay and Cape Breton Canso Antigonish are being created as part of the required redrawing of the electoral map.
It's not without precedent. We have seen political musical chairs, including within the Liberal Party in the past. Sometimes it has generated negative publicity for the party.
Tom Urbaniak says the Liberals tend to do better in urban areas, and Sydney Glace Bay is primarily an urban riding. There is also a high-profile candidate, former Deputy Premier Alan McMaster, that will run for the Conservatives in Cape Breton Canso Antigonish.
He has a lot of connections on the ground. That counts for something in a federal election in Cape Breton. Right? The candidate factor matters in Cape Breton, and Alan McMaster has the candidate advantage.
The local Liberal Riding Association is supporting Batiste. Meanwhile, the federal Liberal Party would only say the nomination process will move forward in due course.
But it will ultimately, I think, fall to the leader and the people around the leader, the new leader of the Liberal Party, to resolve this. And it's going to have to be done very fast. I mean, we could be 2 or 3 weeks away from the start of a federal election campaign.
CBC reached out to Jaime Batiste for an interview, but he declined. Kyle Moore, CBC News, Sydney.
And Ryan Snoddon with us now from the CBC Weather Centre.
And Ryan, it sounds like Thursday's going to be messy.
That's a great way of putting it, Amy. It is going to be messy with snow, then rain, then gusty winds as well, all in play. Thanks so much. There's the system rolling into the Great Lakes as we speak, but on its way to Nova Scotia. Now, the rainfall will be overall the big story with this. Along the Atlantic coastline, 20 to as much as 40 millimeters. Could see some pockets that do exceed that. That's a lot of rain this time of year. The ground is frozen. We've got the snow, the ice. Make sure those storm drains are cleared away. This water is going to need an exit route. Localized flooding, a higher risk this time of year. It doesn't take as much, given it's harder for the water to depart. Thursday morning will be quiet. The other part of this system, while it won't be a lot, that snow is going to roll in throughout the afternoon, impacting the drive home on Thursday with some light accumulation, but enough to make things slick. We will eventually see that change over to rain after a trace to a couple of centimeters of snow, maybe as much as 5 in the higher terrain areas. Then the gusty winds kick in Thursday night. Gusts 60 to 70, even 80 kilometers per hour, Tom and Amy. So lots to talk about with this one.
All right.
Sure. Thanks,
Messy.
Ryan.
Got it. All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Halifax is leading Canadian cities when it comes to downtown recovery. The numbers of people downtown have hit nearly pre-pandemic levels. Haley Ryan has that story.
Halifax has almost hit the same number of people living, visiting, and working downtown than before the pandemic. It's the top city in the country for downtown recovery. And experts say there's one big reason for this: the city's diverse economy.
Halifax has consistently led Canadian cities since the very beginning, doing much better than the others.
Data shows about 10.2 million people came to downtown Halifax from June through December last year. That's just a few thousand short of pre-pandemic levels in 2019. Karen Chappell is director of the School of Cities at the University of Toronto. She says Halifax has many things drawing people downtown, like restaurants and shopping, government offices, universities, residential buildings, and a tourist economy.
So all that is really helping to drive activity downtown and making it really the leading Canadian comeback city.
I think sometimes we forget about the jewel that we have here. Halifax is a beautiful city. We hear this from all the visitors that come here, and we're far from a perfect city, but we've got a lot to offer here.
Halifax's population and development boom in the past few years have likely played a part in driving activity. But this means traffic congestion is now worse than before the pandemic. McKinnon says transit improvements are vital and wants to see better use of the harbour with more ferries and boat taxis.
I think the more that we invest here, the more that we'll continue to see that. We just have to make it a little bit easier for people to get here, that's all.
Quebec City, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are the other top cities seeing their downtowns recover well. Haley Ryan, CBC News, Halifax.
Halifax will soon be looking at options for the former Bloomfield school site. The buildings at the site have been vacant for more than a decade, and one of them caught fire earlier this month, prompting a demolition. Council voted unanimously Tuesday night for a staff report that'll explore what the city can do with the property. Bloomfield was bought by a developer in 2021, but it came with a condition that if construction did not begin by January 2026, the municipality would have the option to buy it back. Well, an artist on Nova Scotia's South Shore is turning people's stories of grief into beautiful works of art.
Chanel Jefferson started what she calls the Grief Project last year. The CBC's Cassidy Chisholm has more.
Like many artists, Chanel Jefferson draws inspiration from nature, but her muse is something entirely different: other people's grief.
Sometimes people don't have the opportunity to share or feel safe enough to share any piece of their story, so to be trusted with that is a very big deal for me.
Jefferson wanted to help people turn their feelings of loss and pain into something beautiful.
I created the Grief Project because of my past experience with grief growing up, where I felt like I wasn't equipped or supported through knowing how to handle the grieving process. I also felt like I didn't experience a traditional form of grief, and therefore it wasn't widely recognized. And recently, as an artist, I had the opportunity to support a friend through the passing of their sister, and I was allowed to visit the garden that his sister had spent a lot of time and care nurturing and taking care of, and create an artwork from what I had seen that day. And it reminded me of how nature and healing are often combined for us, and that it's something that we all experience.
Jefferson started the Grief Project last year. It begins with people sharing their stories of loss, whether it's the death of a relative, a friend, or a pet, through an online submission form.
We have a selection process based off of if we feel that I can make an artwork from their story and do their story justice. After the selection process, we have a quick meeting where I get to meet the person sharing their stories over Zoom, and then I create the artwork based off of the things that they've shared in their form. At the end of the process, everyone who has been selected for the round of the Grief Project gets together, and there's an event curated for the release and reveal of their paintings.
Vicki Lamb had her story of grief painted after her father died suddenly 3 years ago. She attended one of Jefferson's events.
I was very, very nervous about the reveal, and I was also nervous to be around other people who were in different stages of their grief. So for me, my grief was very fresh. Some people, it was not so fresh. So it was kind of interesting to see those perspectives as well. And that process itself was very healing for me. There's a couple things that really stood out to me in this. The crab apples, my dad's favorite tree was a crabapple tree.
The painting, which Lamb chose to name Revival, brought to life a memory of going fishing with her father.
That was a very, very important and special memory to me.
What was your reaction when you first saw the painting?
I cried. I felt very, very overwhelmed, but looking at the painting made me think of my dad, and I could see those memories of fishing and all of that kind of come flooding back when I first saw that, and that's how I kind of knew I had a deep connection with the painting.
Those special memories and the healing they provide is what keeps Jefferson painting.
It's definitely an honor. I feel very special to be able to hold these stories for people, to be trusted, and just to have the opportunity to listen is really special.
Jefferson has completed 22 paintings as part of the Grief Project so far. She says creating these paintings has brought more purpose to her work as an artist.
The project's important to me because, one, I want to continue to always be of service and to help. And I think when we receive our intuition or a nudge or a calling in something that we're supposed to do in life, there's a reason behind it. So it's really important for me to carry out this work and to see where the universe, the world takes it and see where it ends up. But to always just support and help where I can.
Cassidy Chisholm, CBC News, Lunenburg.
And a look at Halifax from one of the Nova Scotia webcams. Ryan will be back with his weather forecast in just a bit.
All right, let's dive deeper into the weather now. And yeah, sounds like we've got some rain on the way.
Yes, but first some snow.
Yeah, that's right. And that snow, not a lot, but just poorly timed, right? Moving in just in time for the drive home. Seems like we've had a lot of these.
Doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. If it's not the morning commute, it's the evening commute.
That's right. A lot of commutes impacted, very few overnight events. But yeah, have a look at our high temperatures today. It did feel very spring-like. 8 degrees at Western Head, 4, 5 degrees, 6 degrees in many spots. A little cooler in through Sydney and Ingonish Beach, but a beautiful day nonetheless. And yeah, had that kind of spring-like feel yet again. Not quite as warm as Tuesday, of course, but still quite lovely. And yeah, as we look at the radar picture after the rain and fog overnight, and there's the rain clearing away from Cape Breton over the last few radar returns. The next system will have even more rain with it. And I should mention, yeah, you can see here as why don't I go back to this graphic just to show you, we are looking at this kind of on the backside of this system, a few flurries that are rolling their way back into the valley tonight, northern areas, and into Cape Breton as well. We'll see a dusting overnight for northern areas and then things turning quiet. This is the system we're keeping an eye on for Thursday. Quiet to start, but it will roll into the afternoon. Temperatures, you can see, excuse me, double digits in Calgary, 5 in through Toronto. And yeah, we are looking at temperatures eventually bumping up here again for Wednesday or Thursday night rather. Overnight lows tonight, -3 to -6, -7. Those northwest winds becoming light after that brief little shot of some flurries and showers over northern areas. And then that quiet start to Thursday. We are going to be looking at temperatures 3, 4, and 5 degrees yet again on Thursday ahead of the snow. So here's how it times out. There's that messy mix in the north through the evening into the overnight. Could see even 5 to as much as maybe a few more centimeters for the Cape Breton Highlands overnight before that system finally departs. There's the quiet start to Thursday, increasing clouds. And as we move into the afternoon, we are watching that snow spreading in and impacting the commute for all of the mainland. I think Cape Breton, okay until supper time. That quick change to rain in through the south and west. This is where we'll have our better chance of seeing some accumulating snow, but only 1-2 centimeters for most. Could see upwards of, say, 5 centimeters, Cobequid Pass, back towards Mount Tom, and then that eventual changeover to rain throughout the evening. Note temperatures 5, 6, 7 degrees, so very mild, and that mild air coupled with the rain, of course, will really, we're going to be seeing a lot of melting with this. So as I mentioned earlier, make sure the storm drains are cleared away, your downspouts are cleared away, that this water has an exit route because the ground is frozen. So it will want to, it'll be harder for the water to get away, no question. Into Friday morning, lingering rain, especially in the east and Cape Breton, and then finally tapering off through Friday. Even a couple of sunny breaks possible, maybe a afternoon flurry in through the northeast. Rainfall amounts ranging between 10 and 20 millimeters for northern areas, 20 to as much as 40 millimeters for southern areas of the province. And along that Atlantic coastline, we indeed could see some pockets that do get up towards the 40 to 50 millimeter range. So rainfall warnings are in effect from Yarmouth right up to Guysborough. Special weather statements currently for Cape Breton. Wouldn't be surprised if warnings are expanded there tomorrow as the system approaches. And let's time out the winds just to show you. Widespread gusts, 60, 70, and 80 kilometers per hour. They'll be howling for sure overnight and into Friday morning. Slight risk of some power outages with these types of winds. So plan accordingly. Make sure things are charged up before you head to bed, and then that system will move out. We've got a weaker system tracking in for Saturday, looking more and more likely to be an accumulating snow event for New Brunswick. Some light snow possible for Nova Scotia with a change to showers for Saturday night. Temperatures falling throughout the day on Sunday, and some pretty chilly air for Monday, but not lasting too long as temperatures will bump up pretty quickly through the mid stages of next week. Tom and Amy.
Lots going on there. Okay, thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Coming up, we head to the Southern Hemisphere to check in with the first all-Canadian Antarctic expedition. Scientists and researchers from the East Coast are joining the Canadian Navy on its first ever Antarctic mission. Alex Normando is a marine geoscientist, normally based in Nova Scotia, but currently aboard HMCS Margaret Brooke, headed south. So you boarded a few days ago. How has it been going so far?
It's been very good so far. So we boarded about 2 days ago, but we arrived in Punta Arenas about 5 days ago. And so during those first 3 days, we were able to mobilize the vessel, put all our equipment on board, make sure all our gear is set up. And in the last 2 days, we've just been sailing offshore Punta Arenas and making our way slowly towards the Drake Passage, where we'll be this evening.
Well, what kind of work will you be doing once you arrive?
So we have a very large multidisciplinary program. So on board we have geologists from Natural Resource Canada. We have some people working on contaminants from ECCC, Environment Canada. We also have Fisheries and Oceans Canada scientists looking at the water column processes. And then we have many representatives from Canadian universities across Canada, including from Dalhousie and from Meopar, that will be looking at oceanography and ocean currents in Antarctica. And so on the marine geology side, we're interested in reconstructing glacial retreat in Antarctica using sediment cores. So we collect sediment from the ocean bottom and then we try to reconstruct where glaciers were 100 years, 1,000 years ago, and then to see how these trends have changed over time in the region.
Well, what are some of the biggest challenges in accessing Antarctica?
One of the big challenges in accessing Antarctica for Canadian scientists, especially marine scientists, is that we don't have a dedicated vessel to do science in Antarctica. So usually when Canadian scientists do research in Antarctica on marine geology or oceanography, they need to collaborate with a foreign vessel, for example, the Germans, the UK, and other countries. And then we follow their research program. So we generally are not leading our own science program when we work in Antarctica. And so this is the first time that Canadian scientists are leading their own research program on a Canadian vessel down to Antarctica. So we're very lucky to be working with the Navy on this deployment and to be putting our science equipment on board this vessel so that we can accomplish Canadian-led science in Antarctica.
Well, why is it so important to explore this part of the world?
So it's important because Canada is a polar nation, and so Canada has a lot of expertise in Arctic research, both in oceanography and marine geology. But if we only work in one pole, in one environment, we don't understand the diversity of processes that are happening across the world. And so for Canada to be engaged like this in Antarctica shows our commitment to polar science on the international stage, and also shows our leadership in polar science internationally. And so in terms of showing how Canada can really become a leader in polar science, both on the oceanography, contaminants, and marine geology side, is important during this expedition.
Well, how exciting is this exploration for you as a scientist?
So it's very exciting. A lot of the team on board has been working in the Arctic, and so we're familiar with these types of environments. Of course, Antarctica is a big inland system, so it's a big ice mass. So we are expecting to see different processes. And also we are looking to see if we can see similar processes from the Arctic and the Antarctic. And so that's going to be also something that we're very interested as scientists to see if similar processes are operating on both poles or if we have different processes. The other thing is that as a scientist, Antarctica is what the Arctic looked like 10,000 years ago. And so that will be also interesting to see these different types of processes that are happening. And of course, from a personal level, everybody's really excited to just be able to see the scenery that Antarctica has to offer.
For your journey so far, has it been smooth sailing?
So far it's been smooth sailing, yes. We've been sailing through fjords and islands, and so it's been fairly calm. We are soon entering the Drake Passage, which is renowned for its big waves. And so soon we are getting advice from everybody, all the crew, to secure our instruments, because we will be entering seas that are a bit more rough in the next few days until we reach the Antarctic Peninsula.
Well, safe travels, and we will be following your journey with interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, U.S. President Donald Trump is creating more confusion over if and when he might impose tariffs against Canada.
And a spike in measles cases in Canada has health officials warning those who are not yet vaccinated. Welcome back. Donald Trump is sowing more confusion about his tariff plans. They're currently on a 30-day pause that's supposed to end next week on March the 4th.
But now the U.S. president appears to be suggesting a further pause, extending the date to April. The CBC's Richard Madden has the latest from Washington.
The Trump administration is revealing a new target date for implementing those punishing tariffs on all Canadian imports, initially set for next week. Now, Trump had paused his 25% tariffs to give Canadians time to strengthen the northern border and stop the flow of fentanyl. And for the past month, Ottawa scrambled with new measures to bolster military spending, fortify the border, and the appointment of a fentanyl czar. On Monday, Trump said that pause would be lifted and his tariffs would be moving ahead as scheduled early next month. Then yesterday, the White House clarified, saying no, the president was referring to different tariffs. So now, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick gave a blueprint on what it would take for the Canadians to avoid the onset of this first round of tariffs.
Well, we have the fentanyl-related is a pause. If they can prove to the president they've done an excellent job, that's what they first do in 30 days. But then the overall is April 2nd.
So this means if the administration is satisfied by Canada's actions, those 25% tariffs would be delayed until April 2nd. But remember, Trump has threatened a whole stack of tariffs against Canada, and it's a bit confusing. So here are some dates to keep in mind. You've got the border and fentanyl tariffs set for March 4th, unless that changes. You have the steel and aluminum tariff set for March 12th. There's Trump's tariffs on all imported vehicles on April the 2nd. And there are separate tariffs on digital taxes, or digital services rather, and on copper, where Canada is one of the biggest suppliers of copper imports into the U.S. Now, we also have heard Trump revive his grievances against Canada, ripping into its defense spending and questioning why the U.S. needs to trade with Canada at all.
Tariffs will make it impossible for them to sell cars into the United States. The tariffs will make it impossible for them to sell lumber or anything else into the United States.
But slapping tariffs on lumber, cars, and possibly steel is complicated since those imports are theoretically protected under the modernized free trade agreement, USMCA or NAFTA 2.0, that Trump himself signed in his first term. So while the Commerce Secretary may have given signs he's willing to negotiate, the White House is signaling the Canada-U.S. relationship is quickly moving towards more uncertainty and tension. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
Donald Trump is hailing he has worked out a deal, allowing the U.S. access to mineral deposits in Ukraine. The country finds itself in a tough spot, trying to seek the support of a new U.S. administration that's expecting something in return of continued support as it fights for a three-year-long invasion attempt from Russia. Chris Brown reports.
The ore being scooped out of this quarry in central Ukraine is what Donald Trump wants a piece of for the United States in exchange for arming Ukraine. Titanium, extremely strong, durable, and yet lightweight. This operation produces it for electronics and engineering components. The operations manager here, Dmytro Holik, says his country could be a world hub of titanium. Ukraine possesses approximately 20% of the world's titanium reserves, he said.
This titanium quarry contains just a fraction of the valuable minerals in the ground in Ukraine. Donald Trump, the U.S. administration, and increasingly many Ukrainians now believe that these natural riches could be part of a political deal to end the war with Russia.
It's a very big deal.
At first, Donald Trump pushed a deal that many Ukrainians felt was badly one-sided. But the framework agreement President Vladimir Zelensky says the U.S. has agreed to speaks instead of co-ownership. Ukraine's industry also faces big challenges, with uncertainty over the war at the top of the list, which has hurt outside investment. Our CBC News team also visited this quarry 200 kilometers south of Kyiv, which produces graphite used in automotive parts and pencils. It's been going since Soviet times and looks it, with outdated equipment that badly needs an upgrade. With investments, there'll be life. The enterprise will operate, says the chief here, Valery Harkovits, adding Zelensky acted correctly by not making the initial concessions. This geologist says if Trump is looking for a fast return on his new deal, he'll be disappointed.
The very quickest way for a new project is from 3 to 5 years. It's when you will be willing to push very fast.
The wisdom of a minerals pact with Trump has been divisive in Ukraine. These veterans all lost limbs in the war. Some of their artificial ones are made out of compounds such as titanium. These two useless old men, Trump and Putin, are ruling the world, said Bogdan Kovbasyuk. I don't believe there's a reason to give the Americans any natural resources because I don't trust them. Chris Brown, CBC News, near Zhytomyr, Ukraine.
Hamas says the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages are set to be released Wednesday night. Israel says an agreement was reached for the handover. It comes after several days of delay that threatened to unravel the fragile truce. Giles Gibson reports from Tel Aviv.
Ahead of the transfer, Hamas published the names of the 4 deceased Israeli hostages, but the Israeli government said that it would not be making the names public until after the formal identification process had taken place, although some family members have been speaking to local media, coming forward and speaking to media outlets here in Israel. This different process of handing over deceased Israeli hostages comes off the back of Israel suspending the release of 602 Palestinian prisoners over the weekend, accusing Hamas of overseeing humiliating handover ceremonies, including living hostages as well as coffins being brought up onto stages, large crowds, music playing, and propaganda slogans and cartoons featuring, for example, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Meanwhile, the first phase of the ceasefire is still set to expire over the weekend, and there's been no official confirmation at this stage that talks have even begun over moving on to phase 2. Those talks were supposed to begin right at the sort of start of phase 1 of the ceasefire. The US Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, has said that an Israeli delegation could be traveling to either Cairo or Doha in the coming days for those talks to begin. There have also been reports that the US Special Envoy to the Middle East delayed a planned trip to the region. According to these reports, that trip could take place on Sunday, so not for several days. And so with the clock ticking down, other than the two sides returning to open hostilities, if this ceasefire is to remain in place, then the most likely scenario is looking like phase 1 being extended to give both sides more time to discuss some of the thornier issues that are in the second phase of the deal. Giles Gibson for CBC News, Tel Aviv.
Hundreds of mourners gathered in Israel for the funeral of a young mother and her 2 children killed in captivity in Gaza. The 2 young boys, Ariel and Kafir Bibas, and their mother, Shiri, were kidnapped in October on the 7th of 2023, attacked by Hamas. Israel says were murdered by Hamas after their abduction. The militants say they were killed in an Israeli airstrike 15 months ago. The service follows the handover of their bodies last week. The father of the boys, who was captured separately from his family, was released during a hostages for prisoner exchange earlier this month.
Rising cases of measles in Canada have health officials urging anyone who isn't vaccinated to do so. More than 90 cases in several provinces so far this year puts the country on pace for the highest number in years. Jennifer Yoon reports.
In this southwestern Ontario community, a measles vaccination campaign to convince those who are hesitant. At least 68 people in the area are sick with the highly contagious disease. Officials say most of those ill haven't been vaccinated.
I think the message is getting out there, but not quite as effectively as we would hope.
Surge in cases is linked to community settings like schools and grocery stores, but most are being traced back to 2 events. A wedding in New Brunswick and a conference in Quebec. Attendees who had contracted measles abroad infected several people. They in turn went home and infected others. That has led to outbreaks in Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba. Separately, there are 2 other cases in BC, residents returning home from Thailand.
You combine poor vaccination rate with a disease that is highly communicable, like measles. Really, no infection is as infectious.
The disease was declared eradicated in Canada in 1998, but so far this year, 95 people have gotten sick with measles. For comparison, last year there were 147 cases total.
This measles outbreak represents the largest number of measles cases that we've experienced in Ontario since measles was declared eliminated from Canada.
Now there are fears that the disease may re-emerge more permanently.
What I would like to see is that we stop these outbreaks in their tracks so that it doesn't become entrenched in the Canadian context.
There is no cure for measles. The only defense is vaccination. And with case numbers increasing globally and spring break around the corner, Dr. Tam is imploring Canadians to get that protection, especially before traveling. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Health officials in Texas say an unvaccinated child in the state has died from measles. In a statement, they said the school-aged child had been hospitalized last week. This is the first death from measles in the U.S. in 10 years. An outbreak in rural West Texas began a month ago with at least 124 cases now reported across 9 counties. The majority of the cases have been among those unvaccinated. Most are younger than 18.
A Quebec woman says she was the victim of a disturbing and sophisticated scam. It started with a call pretending to be from her bank, claiming about a suspicious activity on her account. They then sent someone to her home to pick up her bank cards to resolve it. And as Nicole Williams reports, she's just one among many falling victim to such tactics.
Amanda Kawanda says it took one phone call earlier this month to lose all sense of safety.
Hello? It's telling me, thank you for calling RBC Fraud and Loss Department.
The single mom of 2 says the caller told her there was some suspicious activity on her account. They had detailed information about her, including her phone number and her address.
He starts listing transactions that were legitimate that I actually made as close as the night before.
The caller then told Kawanda an investigator would need to come collect her cards for a full fraud analysis.
15 minutes later, somebody rings my doorbell.
A man with a bank business card and lanyard.
He was dressed professionally.
Kawanda invites him in and hands over her cards, believing she's just avoided having her money stolen, only to call her bank an hour and a half later and discover the real scam was the one at her door.
And that was such a violation of my home and my sense of safety and I felt scared for weeks.
She says the scammer then withdrew and made purchases worth about $20,000 using her credit and debit cards. And according to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, this particular scam is responsible for about $16 million in losses last year, up 250% from 2021, and there have been reports from across the country.
We have to remember that, our information is a lot easier accessible than it was in the past.
Cybersecurity experts say fraudsters are only becoming more sophisticated, using tools like AI to take scams offline and in person.
You just need to type a search query in to some database you might have purchased on the dark web, and you get the information that tells you exactly where to go and what to say.
Kawanda has filed a police report and is currently trying to get her money back from the bank. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Toronto.
Soon after taking office, President Donald Trump renamed places on the U.S. map using executive orders to honor, in his words, American greatness. But the past few days, social media has been buzzing with Canadians wondering if something similar had happened here. They noticed many provincial parks were categorized as state parks on Google Maps. Liam Britton has more.
We are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Donald Trump made good on that promise, and Google Maps reflects it, at least for U.S. users. But this weekend, social media was abuzz, with Canadians wondering if something similar had happened here, asking in over 1,000 Google Help questions, plus hundreds of Reddit, Facebook, and Threads comments, why is Google Maps now categorizing many provincial parks as state parks?
So I thought, well, how can this possibly be true?
Kiki Grabowski wrote to Google and BC Parks to register her concerns.
Well, that's our sovereignty. That's our country. Those parks belong to Canada. They are not state parks.
She's not alone. Many were asking if the Trump administration had something to do with it. Others began submitting complaints about the error for specific parks. CBC watched as one park's category changed from state park to park several times.
All right. So why did Google change provincial parks into state parks? Well, the company says they actually didn't, although changes will come.
A spokesperson told CBC the vast majority of these parks have had their existing labels for several years. We're actively working to update labels for parks in Canada to avoid confusion. One expert on Canadian English argues this speaks to the influence of American tech companies.
American programmer assumes it's the same here, and so will categorize it as state, or why should I, it's an extra step to relabel that category. So things that can be overlooked. So there you have to be a bit more generous.
He and a geography professor agree the thing to do is complain.
I do think that Canadians are right to criticize these maps and to say, hey, these are not state parks. These are provincial parks, and they should be labeled as such.
It's not clear what exactly will come of Canadians' complaints, but make no mistake, they are passionate about the state of provincial parks. Liam Britton, CBC News, West Vancouver.
Canada's main stock index rose more than 100 points Wednesday, while U.S. stock markets muddled to a mixed close. Here's a look at the numbers as we head to break. This is Nova Scotia. And this is Nova Scotia on your smart TV because CBC News is now streaming local. Get local headlines, weather, and community stories, plus newscasts and live programming on your favorite connected device, all for free. It's called the CBC News Nova Scotia streaming channel. See your community on your connected TV and mobile devices. Your local news streaming channel, now available. Well, it's been nice these last few days. I'm going to miss them.
Yeah, messy weather coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's reality, right? We're still in late February, but this was a nice couple of days for a little break for sure. Have a look at our viewer picture of the day. Picking up on the beach theme, if you were watching last night, we had a picture from the beach. This is just down the coast from last night at Rainbow Haven. Tonight, Martinique.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
That is a nice
Pretty
scene,
artistic looking, the angle and everything.
Some snow there, sand, but some snow too.
A little bit of both.
Yeah. Janice Young, thank you so much for sharing. Ryan's picks at cbc.ca. Won't be too long before that beach will be packed with folks, just a couple of months. Not too long. There's the rainfall warning that's in effect for Martinique and all along the Atlantic coastline. Basically, the southern half of Nova Scotia. Special weather statements for Cape Breton, a lace of wet wind warning for Thursday night. There is the rainfall map, which again shows about 10 to 20 millimeters for northern areas, 20 to 40 millimeters, with some pockets that could push up towards 50 along that Atlantic coastline. And again, this time of year, the ground is frozen. That water has a tougher time finding an exit route across your property. So make sure the storm drains are unclogged of snow and ice. Make sure your downspouts are accessible if you can get at them to make sure that they're clear of snow and ice as well. There's the timeline, and we will be looking at, again, that snow tracking in through Thursday afternoon. Unfortunate timing with this, given it is going to be moving in time for the drive home on Thursday. That change to rain in through the south and west, and then that bump to everybody over to rain after about a trace to a couple centimeters for most. Could see upwards of 5 centimeters for higher terrain areas, and those winds will be gusty. Another system set for Saturday.
Okay.
There's always another, isn't there? All right, Diana Taurasi, the WNBA's all-time leading scorer, is retiring.
The 42-year-old tells Time magazine she's hanging up her sneakers after 20 seasons. She was the first overall draft pick in 2004, coming out of the University of Connecticut, where she helped the school win 3 straight national championships.
Taurasi's accolades throughout her professional career are too many to mention. She's a 6-time Olympic gold medalist and is often described as the GOAT of women's basketball. In the interview with Time, she says, mentally and physically, I'm just full and happy.
That's good. Good accomplishment.
Great career. That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.